The courtroom camera captured a moment that would break the internet and restore millions of people's faith in the justice system. Karen Vanderbilt Chase, dripping in diamonds and designer labels, stood before Judge Judy with the kind of toxic confidence that only comes from a lifetime of buying her way out of consequences. Her perfectly manicured finger pointed directly at America's most feared television judge as the words that would destroy her life forever spilled from her glossy lips. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm rich. I have money. I have lawyers. And in this country I can buy justice." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into that legendary death stare that had made seasoned attorneys break down on national television. But what happened in the next 36 seconds would leave the entire audience speechless, turn Karen from an entitled millionaire into a sobbing, broken mess, and prove once and for all that in Judge Judy's courtroom, your bank account means absolutely nothing when facing real accountability. Karen had walked into that courtroom believing she was untouchable. For the past 5 years, she had used her inherited wealth as a weapon against anyone she deemed beneath her. 23 lawsuits filed against working-class families, immigrants, and minorities. 23 times she had used expensive lawyers and endless legal motions to bankrupt defendants before they could even present their cases. 23 times she had walked away richer while her victims lost their homes, their savings, and their dignity. Today was supposed to be just another easy payday, another chance to humiliate someone who couldn't afford to fight back, another opportunity to prove that money really does buy everything, including justice. She had no idea that Judge Judy had spent the previous sleepless night making phone calls to district attorneys, pulling court records and uncovering secrets about Karen's wealth that would expose her as not just a bully, but a criminal who had been hiding behind expensive lawyers and inherited millions for years. The plaintiff sitting across from Karen looked like she might shatter into a million pieces from sheer terror. Maria Santos, a 42-year-old single mother of 3, clutched a worn folder containing every document she'd managed to gather while working 3 cleaning jobs just to keep her children fed. For 6 months, Karen had been systematically destroying Maria's life over a minor scratch on her Bentley, a scratch that would cost $300 to repair but had somehow become a $50,000 lawsuit that threatened to bankrupt a woman whose entire life savings totaled less than $2,500 Maria had offered to pay for the damage immediately. She had begged Karen to be reasonable. She had even offered to work for free for an entire year to make it right. But Karen had smelled blood in the water. She had seen an opportunity to inflict maximum pain on someone powerless to fight back, weaponizing the legal system against a woman whose only crime was being poor and vulnerable. What made Karen's behavior even more chilling was the pattern that had emerged over the years. Every single one of her 23 lawsuits had targeted people who couldn't afford proper legal representation: immigrant housekeepers, elderly pensioners, disabled veterans, and single mothers struggling to survive. Karen had turned predatory litigation into her personal hobby, using the court system as her playground and human suffering as her entertainment. She would file massive lawsuits over trivial matters, then use her expensive legal team to drag cases out for months or years until defendants went bankrupt from legal fees alone. Then she would offer to settle for slightly less than her original demand, extracting thousands of dollars from people who had nothing while positioning herself as generous and merciful. The local legal community knew exactly what she was doing, but wealthy predators with expensive lawyers rarely face consequences. In a system designed to favor those who can afford to weaponize it, Karen had prepared for this Judge Judy appearance like a general planning a military campaign. She had hired a 500-per-hour attorney to coach her on courtroom performance, though she had smugly told him that television judges weren't real judges anyway and that she probably didn't need his help. She had selected her outfit carefully, an $8,000 designer ensemble that screamed wealth and superiority, paired with jewelry worth more than Maria's annual income. She had practiced her victim performance in front of mirrors, perfecting the blend of wounded innocence and righteous indignation that had worked so well in her previous legal battles. She even posted on social media about how she was about to educate a television judge on how real law worked in the real world. Her friends had wished her luck. Her lawyer had given final coaching, and her hairstylist had ensured every blonde highlight was perfect for the cameras. Karen walked into that courtroom absolutely convinced that her money Her status and her expensive legal preparation would steamroll over both Judge Judy and the terrified cleaning woman who dared to challenge her. She had no idea she was walking into a trap carefully set by a judge who had spent 25 years dismantling people exactly like her. The atmosphere in Judge Judy's courtroom crackled with tension as the bailiff called the case. Karen Vanderbilt Chase versus Maria Santos, dispute over property damage $50,000. The audience, mostly retirees who had been watching Judge Judy religiously for decades, immediately sensed something different about this case. They had seen countless disputes, but the contrast between these two women was almost obscene. Karen sat in the defendant's chair as if posing for a magazine cover, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, her posture radiating the entitlement of someone who had never heard the word no. Maria trembled in the plaintiff's seat, her threadbare coat clutched around her shoulders, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her papers. This wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a battle between wealth and poverty, arrogance and desperation, cruelty and survival. Judge Judy opened the proceedings with her characteristic efficiency, cutting through formalities with surgical precision. Miss Santos, you're suing because Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase is demanding $50,000 for a scratch on her vehicle. Tell me exactly what happened. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper as she described that terrible day 6 months earlier. She had been cleaning Karen's mansion, a job that paid $15 an hour for 4 hours twice a week. While carrying cleaning supplies to her car, she accidentally bumped Karen's Bentley with her bucket, leaving a small scratch on the rear bumper. She immediately confessed, apologized profusely, and offered to pay for repairs. She even obtained 3 estimates from reputable body shops, all ranging between $250 and $350. Maria offered to pay the highest amount immediately, even though it represented nearly her entire emergency fund, 2 years of savings. But Karen refused every reasonable solution. Instead, Karen filed a $50,000 lawsuit, claiming the scratch had devalued her entire vehicle, caused severe emotional distress, and demonstrated a pattern of negligence deserving maximum punishment. Then she went further. She called every one of Maria's other cleaning clients, telling them that Maria was being sued for property destruction and implying that their belongings weren't safe around her. Within 2 weeks, Maria had lost 2 of her 3 jobs. Karen then reported Maria to immigration authorities, filing a false claim that she was undocumented, despite Maria being a U.S. citizen born in Texas. The investigation was dropped immediately, but not before Maria spent 3 terrifying days believing she might be deported and separated from her children. As if that weren't enough, Karen posted about the lawsuit on social media, sharing Maria's photos and calling her a criminal who destroyed other people's property. Because of those posts, Maria's children were bullied at school. Her teenage daughter had attempted suicide after classmates showed her the cruel things Karen had written about her mother online. Judge Judy listened to Maria's testimony with an expression that revealed nothing, but experienced viewers recognized the subtle signs: the slight tightening around her eyes, the brief drumming of her fingers on the bench before going completely still, the microscopic shift in her posture that signaled a predator preparing to strike. When Maria finished describing how her daughter had spent 3 days in the hospital after swallowing pills, how the therapy bills were piling up, and how she was working 16-hour days trying to replace the income Karen had destroyed, Judge Judy turned her attention to the defendant with the kind of focused intensity that had made her a legend. Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase, you're demanding $50,000 for a scratch that multiple body shops estimated would cost under $400 to repair. Explain that math to me. Karen's response was everything Judge Judy had expected, and worse. She didn't just answer the question. She performed, dripping with condescension and barely concealed contempt. Your Honor, clearly you don't understand how luxury vehicles work. When a Bentley is damaged, even minor damage affects the entire vehicle's value. I can't just get it repaired at some discount body shop that this woman found. I have to use authorized Bentley service centers with certified technicians. Plus, there's the emotional trauma of having my property violated by someone I trusted in my home. The audience gasped audibly, but Karen wasn't done. She rolled her eyes dramatically, her voice taking on the tone of a frustrated teacher explaining something obvious to a slow student. Furthermore, Your Honor, people like her need to learn that actions have consequences. She comes from a culture where property rights aren't respected the same way. If I don't pursue maximum damages, what message does that send? That people can just damage other people's belongings without real consequences? The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Judy raised her hand for silence, her face unreadable but her eyes icy cold. "Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase," she said quietly, and everyone who had ever watched the show knew that tone meant someone was about to be eviscerated. "Let's talk about your history of litigation. You've filed 23 lawsuits in the past 5 years, all against working-class defendants, all settled out of court. Why is that?" Karen's smirk widened. She thought this was her moment to shine, her opportunity to educate this television judge about how the real world worked. "Your Honor, I file lawsuits because I refuse to be a victim. If people damage my property, they pay. If they can't afford proper legal representation, that's not my problem. I have excellent lawyers, and yes, people usually settle because they realize they can't win against my legal team. That's just how the system works. Some people can afford justice and some people can't." Judge Judy's eyebrows lifted slightly. "So you're saying justice is for sale?" Karen's response would be the moment that destroyed her completely. She actually laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound that echoed through the silent courtroom. "Your Honor, let's be realistic here." She stood from her chair without permission, her designer heels clicking sharply against the courtroom floor as she stepped toward Judge Judy's bench. Her voice rose with indignation, her perfectly made-up face twisted into an expression of supreme arrogance. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'm rich. I have money. I have lawyers. And in this country, I can buy justice. Now either rule in my favor, or I'll have my attorneys tie this up for years until that woman loses everything." She waved her hand dismissively toward Maria, who sat frozen in shock. The courtroom went completely silent. Not a single person moved. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. The audience sat in stunned disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Karen had actually admitted on live television that she believed justice was a commodity she could purchase. She had confessed to weaponizing the legal system to destroy people who couldn't afford to defend themselves. She had openly threatened to bankrupt an innocent woman out of pure spite, and she was still smirking, still radiating toxic confidence, completely unaware that she had just handed Judge Judy the ammunition needed to destroy her completely. 5 seconds of absolute silence stretched into eternity. Karen's smile remained frozen on her face, her posture still defiant, still certain she had just delivered a crushing blow that would force Judge Judy to back down. She had no idea that those 5 seconds were Judge Judy processing the most spectacular self-destruction she had witnessed in 25 years of presiding over cases. The judge, who had faced thousands of liars, manipulators, and criminals, was looking at something special. A wealthy predator so drunk on her own power that she had confessed her crimes on national television while genuinely believing she was demonstrating strength. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair slowly and deliberately, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was the smile that regular viewers knew meant someone's world was about to end. She reached down and pulled out a thick manila folder that had been sitting on her desk since before Karen entered the courtroom. The folder was stuffed with documents marked with colored tabs, clearly the result of extensive research and preparation. "Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase," Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the dangerous calm of a gathering storm. "That's very interesting. You believe you can buy justice. Let's talk about where your money actually came from, shall we?" The smile vanished from Karen's face in an instant. Her hand rose unconsciously to her throat, a gesture of sudden vulnerability that betrayed her growing panic. Judge Judy opened the folder with methodical precision and removed the first set of documents. "Your father, Raymond Vanderbilt, died 3 years ago. His original will left his entire estate, valued at $2.3 million, to the Children's Hospital Foundation, a charity he had supported for 40 years after they saved your brother's life when you were children. But that will mysteriously disappeared, didn't it? And a new will surfaced, leaving everything to you." Karen's confident tan had turned a sickly pale. "Your Honor, I don't see what this has to do with anything," she stammered. But Judge Judy's raised hand silenced her instantly. "I made some phone calls last night. Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase. Very interesting phone calls to probate attorneys, hospital administrators, and court clerks who remembered your father's case." Judge Judy pulled out more documents, each one like a nail being driven into Karen's coffin. Your father's original attorney testified under oath that Raymond never wanted to change his will. But you hired a different lawyer who produced medical documents claiming your father was mentally incompetent in his final months. Documents that 3 different doctors have now stated were falsified. You didn't inherit your wealth, Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase. You stole it from dying children. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Maria's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Karen stumbled backward, her designer heel catching on the chair, nearly falling. But Judge Judy wasn't finished with her systematic destruction. Let's talk about your 23 lawsuits, shall we? Judge Judy pulled out another section of documents covered in highlights and handwritten notes. I spent hours last night reviewing every single case. Do you know what pattern emerged? Every single defendant was either an immigrant, elderly, disabled, or a single parent. Every single lawsuit was for an amount just large enough to bankrupt them, but small enough to make fighting it more expensive than settling. Every single case settled out of court after you buried defendants in legal motions they couldn't afford to respond to. You extracted $340,000 from vulnerable people over 5 years. You're not a businesswoman, Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase. You're a predator who hunts the weakest members of society. Karen's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed back into her chair, her hands gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Your Honor, please. You don't understand, she whispered, her voice stripped of all earlier confidence. Oh, I understand perfectly, Judge Judy replied, her tone now carrying the full weight of judicial authority. I also made calls to the district attorney's office last night. They're very interested in your inheritance fraud. I sent them copies of all the probate documents. They're also interested in your tax returns because, funny thing, you reported $2.3 million in inheritance income, but never reported the $340,000 you extracted through predatory lawsuits. The IRS will be contacting you tomorrow morning. Karen's transformation was complete and devastating. 36 seconds had passed since Judge Judy opened that folder. 36 seconds to dismantle a lifetime of lies, fraud, and cruelty. The woman who had strutted into the courtroom radiating toxic confidence was now hyperventilating, her carefully styled hair falling across her face, her makeup running as tears of panic filled her eyes. Wait, Karen gasped, her voice rising to a near shriek. This isn't fair. You can't do this. I came here for a simple lawsuit. Judge Judy's expression was colder than ice. Fair? You want to talk about fair? You stole from a children's hospital. You spent 5 years terrorizing vulnerable people. You admitted on live television that you believe you can buy justice. And now you want to discuss fairness? Her voice cut through Karen's protests like a blade. You didn't buy justice today, Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase. You bought a federal investigation, an IRS audit, and a criminal referral. 36 seconds to destroy a predator. 36 seconds to prove that in her courtroom, wealth meant nothing against the truth. The transformation unfolding in Karen Vanderbilt Chase was so complete, so utterly devastating, that even the most jaded court staff would later say they had never seen anything like it. The woman who had pointed her finger at Judge Judy and declared she could buy justice was now gripping the defendant's table like a drowning person clinging to driftwood. Her breathing came in short, panicked gasps. The designer outfit that had cost more than Maria's monthly rent now looked like an expensive costume on someone playing dress-up. The jewelry she had worn to intimidate and impress now seemed to weigh her down, each diamond a reminder of the stolen fortune that had fueled her cruelty. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to form words, her earlier eloquence completely shattered. Your Honor, please, this is a misunderstanding. I never meant. I was just. The cameras must have. It was taken out of context. She was scrambling desperately, searching for some foothold in the avalanche of consequences crashing down on her. Judge Judy watched the meltdown with detached interest. As someone who had seen this exact pattern countless times before, the arrogant defendant who believed they were untouchable, slowly realizing their armor had been stripped away, desperately trying to rewrite history in real time. Judge Judy's voice sliced through Karen's babbling with surgical precision. You stood up in my courtroom, pointed your finger at me and stated clearly that you can buy justice. You threatened to use your wealth and lawyers to destroy Miss Santos. We're filming live, Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase. There is no editing. There is no misunderstanding. There are millions of people watching you confess to everything I just accused you of. Karen's hands flew to her face, smearing her carefully applied makeup across her cheeks. She was crying now, real tears mixing with fake ones, creating dark streaks that made her look like a melting wax figure. But these weren't tears of remorse or guilt. They were the tears of someone who had finally realized that consequences were real and unavoidable. She wasn't crying for Maria's suffering or for the children she had stolen from. She was crying because, for the first time in her privileged life, her money couldn't protect her from accountability. "Please, Your Honor, please," Karen sobbed, her voice taking on a whining, childlike tone that made the audience visibly uncomfortable. "I'll drop the lawsuit right now. I'll pay her. I'll pay Miss Santos whatever she wants. Just please, please don't call the district attorney. Please don't involve the IRS. I made a mistake. I was angry. I didn't mean what I said." She was begging now, her earlier superiority completely gone, replaced by raw desperation. Judge Judy allowed the pleading to continue for several long seconds, letting Karen's humiliation sink in completely before responding. The courtroom remained absolutely silent except for Karen's sobs. Maria sat frozen, unable to process that the woman, who had terrorized her for 6 months, was now unraveling completely. The audience exchanged glances of satisfaction mixed with uneasy recognition. They were witnessing someone's complete public destruction. "You'll drop the lawsuit," Judge Judy finally said, her tone dripping with contempt. "How generous of you. After 6 months of harassment, after costing Ms. Santos 2 jobs, after your social media posts led to her daughter's suicide attempt, after threatening to bury her in court for years. Now you want to drop it because you got caught? Because your crimes are about to be investigated? That's not remorse, Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase, that's panic." Karen's sobbing intensified, her body shaking uncontrollably. She looked around the courtroom for sympathy, but met only disgusted stares. Even her own lawyer, who had coached her before the appearance, was now staring at his phone, probably drafting a statement to distance himself from her spectacular implosion. The bailiff stepped closer, not because Karen was dangerous, but because her breakdown was so intense she seemed moments away from collapse. Judge Judy turned toward the camera, addressing the millions watching live. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when entitlement meets accountability. Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase came into my courtroom believing her wealth made her untouchable. She believed she could buy justice, intimidate me, and continue destroying vulnerable people without consequence. She was wrong." The camera zoomed in on Karen's face, pure humiliation and dawning horror, as she realized her downfall was being broadcast to millions. "Your Honor," Karen gasped through her tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I made a terrible mistake. Please, I can't afford all this. If the IRS audits me, if the DA presses charges, I'll lose everything. Please have mercy." Judge Judy's response was swift and merciless. "Mercy? You showed no mercy to Miss Santos when she begged you to accept a fair payment. You showed no mercy when you destroyed her income. You showed no mercy when your actions drove her daughter to attempt suicide. You showed no mercy to the 23 people you terrorized over 5 years. You showed no mercy to dying children when you stole their hospital funding. And now you want mercy from me?" Her words struck like physical blows, each one stripping away another layer of Karen's dignity. The same woman who had once lectured others about actions having consequences was now facing her own. Judge Judy leaned forward, her voice dropping to that quiet, deadly tone that signaled the end. "Here's what's going to happen. Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase, your frivolous lawsuit against Miss Santos is dismissed with prejudice. You will pay her $8,000 immediately to cover her lost wages, the therapy bills for her daughter, and her time defending against your harassment," Judge Judy continued. "But that's not all. You will also pay Miss Santos $50,000 in punitive damages. That's the exact amount you tried to extort from her. Consider it a lesson in how consequences actually work." Karen let out a sound somewhere between a scream and a sob. $58,000 total. The courtroom erupted in applause. Maria collapsed forward in her chair, crying with relief after 6 months of terror. Judge Judy spoke over the noise. "Additionally, I'm forwarding all documentation to the State Bar Association regarding your attorney's involvement in your inheritance fraud. Copies of this episode are going to the IRS, and the Children's Hospital Foundation will receive contact information for the probate attorneys who testified about your father's original will." Karen was beyond speech. reduced to incoherent sobbing as the full weight of her consequences crashed down on her. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned courtroom like a gunshot, marking the end of an execution. Case dismissed. Mrs. Vanderbilt Chase, you are ordered to pay $58,000 to Ms. Santos immediately. Next time, if there is a next time, show some respect for this court and for basic human decency. Get out of my courtroom. Judge Judy's words carried absolute finality. Karen tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The bailiff had to assist her to her feet as she stumbled toward the exit, her designer heels catching on the floor, her expensive purse spilling its contents across the courtroom as her shaking hands failed to maintain their grip. The woman who had strutted in like a conquering hero was now being half carried out like a defeated prisoner. Her sobs echoed down the hallway long after she disappeared from view, the ghost of her arrogance lingering in the space she had occupied just minutes before. The courtroom remained silent for several seconds after her exit, everyone processing what they had just witnessed. Then Maria Santos broke down completely, not from despair this time, but from overwhelming relief. 6 months of terror, harassment, and financial destruction had ended in 36 seconds of devastating justice. Within 3 hours of the episode airing, the internet exploded. The clip of Karen declaring she could buy justice, immediately followed by Judge Judy's systematic destruction of her lies, went viral across every social media platform: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit. Every corner of the internet was sharing, commenting, and celebrating what millions called the greatest moment in courtroom television history. The hashtag #MoneyCannotBuyJustice trended worldwide within the first hour. By the end of the first day, the video had been viewed over 80 million times, becoming one of the most watched courtroom clips in internet history. Comment sections were flooded with people sharing stories of being bullied by wealthy predators, celebrating Karen's downfall, and praising Judge Judy for proving accountability still existed in America. Memes proliferated, showing Karen's confident smirk transforming into her tearful breakdown, often captioned, "This is what happens when entitlement meets reality," or, "The exact moment she realized money doesn't buy everything." Karen's personal life disintegrated with breathtaking speed. Her social media accounts, which she had used to torment Maria and boast about her lawsuit victory, were flooded with thousands of comments condemning her cruelty and fraud. She deleted every account within 6 hours, but the internet never forgets. Screenshots of her posts bragging about lawsuits, mocking victims, and flaunting her wealth were archived and shared endlessly. Her husband, Robert, a successful banker who apparently knew nothing about her inheritance fraud or predatory litigation, filed for divorce within 48 hours of the episode airing. His attorney released a statement claiming Robert was shocked and appalled by the revelations and had been completely unaware of his wife's criminal activities. Whether true or simply convenient distancing, the marriage that had lasted 12 years ended in less than 2 days. Karen's membership at the exclusive country club, where she had spent thousands annually, was revoked by emergency board vote. The club cited a moral character clause in their membership agreement. Her friends, the wealthy socialites she had brunches and vacations with, publicly distanced themselves on social media, posting statements condemning her actions and expressing support for Maria Santos. In less than a week, Karen had gone from social queen to complete pariah. The legal consequences followed even faster. Within 72 hours, the district attorney's office, prompted by Judge Judy's prior contacts, officially opened a criminal investigation into Karen's inheritance fraud. The evidence Judge Judy had compiled, combined with testimony from her father's original attorney and the doctors who confirmed the falsified medical documents, created an overwhelming case. Within 2 weeks, Karen was formally charged with inheritance fraud, forgery, and perjury. Her criminal trial lasted 8 months, but the outcome was never in doubt. She was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. The judge cited her complete lack of remorse and her statement about buying justice as evidence that she remained a danger to society. Prison time was only the beginning. The Children's Hospital Foundation, which Raymond Vanderbilt had intended to benefit from his estate, filed a civil lawsuit seeking the full $2.3 million plus interest and damages, arguing that Karen's fraud had deprived dying children of critical medical funding for 3 years. The case settled for the full amount, plus an additional $500,000 in damages. Karen's assets were seized, her mansion sold at auction, and her jewelry and designer belongings liquidated. Everything she had stolen was returned to its rightful purpose. The IRS audit Judge Judy had predicted revealed further criminality. Karen had failed to report the $340,000 she had extracted through predatory lawsuits over 5 years. She owed back taxes, penalties and interest totaling over $120,000. Her bank accounts were frozen, and her wages were garnished for years to come. Perhaps the most satisfying legal consequence came from the 23 prior victims of her predatory litigation. They organized, hired a civil rights attorney, and filed a massive class action lawsuit for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, seeking $800,000 in damages, attorney fees, and punitive awards. Each victim testified about how Karen had targeted them because they were vulnerable, weaponized the legal system, and destroyed their finances, health, and faith in justice. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours before awarding the plaintiffs everything they requested. Karen, who had once bragged about buying justice, now faced over $3 million in judgments with no assets left to pay them. Meanwhile, Maria Santos's life transformed. The $58,000 from Judge Judy's ruling arrived within days, providing immediate relief after 6 months of financial terror. That was just the beginning. A GoFundMe campaign started by viewers of the episode raised an additional $127,000 from people around the world. Maria paid off all her debts, covered her daughter's therapy bills, and finally gained real financial security. She used part of the funds to start her own cleaning business, hiring 5 employees, all of whom were previous victims of predatory lawsuits by wealthy clients. Her business thrived because people wanted to support someone who had survived Karen's cruelty. Within a year, Maria had expanded to 15 employees, providing living wages and benefits she herself had never received. Her daughter recovered from her suicide attempt and became an advocate for children of parents targeted by legal harassment. Her other 2 children received college scholarships from donors who had seen the Judge Judy episode and wanted to help. The case created lasting change beyond just Maria and Karen. Local courts implemented new screening procedures to identify predatory litigation patterns. The state legislature passed a law nicknamed the Vanderbilt Chase Rule, allowing judges to sanction wealthy plaintiffs who filed frivolous lawsuits against vulnerable defendants and to award attorney fees and punitive damages in proven harassment cases. Legal aid societies received increased funding and referrals for people targeted by wealthy bullies. Law schools began using the episode as a teaching tool on legal ethics, abuse of process, and the responsibilities tied to access to expensive legal representation. Judge Judy's handling of the case became legendary among legal professionals and viewers alike. She had proven that in her courtroom, justice wasn't for sale. Wealth provided no protection against truth and accountability. 36 seconds had been enough to destroy a lifetime of lies. When someone finally had the courage and authority to demand answers, Karen Vanderbilt Chase learned the most expensive lesson of her life. She had walked into that courtroom believing money could buy anything, including justice. She walked out having lost everything, facing prison time, buried in debt, and forever remembered as the poster child for entitled arrogance meeting unavoidable consequences. She had tried to buy justice and instead purchased her own destruction. Maria Santos learned a different lesson. Justice sometimes does prevail. Courage in the face of overwhelming power can be rewarded, and speaking the truth, even when terrified, can change everything. Most importantly, in Judge Judy's courtroom, character matters infinitely more than bank accounts. Truth is more powerful than expensive lies, and real justice cannot be bought at any price. If you believe wealthy bullies should face consequences, if this story restored your faith and accountability, share it with anyone who needs to see that money doesn't buy everything. Comment on whether the justice system does enough to protect vulnerable people from predatory litigation. This isn't just a story about one Karen getting destroyed. It's proof that when the right person stands up, when someone with authority refuses to be intimidated by wealth, justice can prevail and accountability is possible. In the end, Karen thought 36 seconds would be her moment of triumph. Instead, it became her confession, her destruction, and the moment that proved justice will never be for sale.